okay, I'm doing enough in community-based reporting by helping people. I'm letting the people know there's a problem here. But no, you take the makeup off, take the nice clothes off, leave the station, and do more. Why? What motivates you to keep going?
Well, I think it was speaking for myself, my real desire to give back something tangible, to actually have that connection that was more than just, nice to meet you, I have a deadline, I've got to go. It was that ability to really connect. I had a strong desire to get involved with some sort of charity and some sort of independent thing, but when I looked at who my friends were and this amazing network of powerful news women, I thought there can be no better group and no more effective group than this group. Now, we are the women, we let the men in, I have to say. We call ourselves, the good news girls, or, there's a few good men in that as well, but to look out at our fundraising event and to see literally every station represented and every news reporter and anchor and producer and news executive there, it's a really remarkable room of people that really know this community unlike anyone else. And also, we're a competitive bunch. If we can get that room together, I don't see why the lawyers in town and the doctors in town and the real estate agents in town couldn't do similar work.
Christine, I know how tedious it can be being an anchor person because you sit behind the desk and you're kind of reading the teleprompter. And yes, you're guiding and coordinating. You're sort of being the ringmaster of the news gathering and dissemination process. But I imagine this must really feel good to get out of that anchor chair and walk into the community and be a force.
Well, we all know so many people. I helped coordinate the silent auction last year, and I just found people wanted to give back. It was so easy to make a phone call and say, hey, we're doing this, it's going to help so-and-so and so-and-so. And people said, yes, I want to take part. And we had over 100 items. It was a great silent auction, a great, easy fundraiser. Well, one program I really wanted to be part of was honoring somebody in our business who was doing something, and we didn't want it to be the anchor who goes out and MCs.
Right. As
anchors, we've all been out and MC'd something. We wanted to find somebody who was actually doing something. We found amazing people. Our first honoree was our director, happened to be at Fox 11, who started a foundation, now it's a foundation, where she collects gently used baby clothes and gives them to teen pregnant mothers who have nothing.
Wow.
And she runs us out of her house. Her garage is packed with donations. It's really taken off, and we gave her the voice to say, you're not just that person behind the scenes. You are important. You're doing something important, and we believe in you.
Well, I
can just say, too, you have the good housekeeping seal of approval. This is kind of the good news seal of approval. I mean, in one way, yes, we do help financially, and we kind of help guide them a little bit, but it's so rewarding to see these smaller charities that we've found become bigger charities and become more self-sufficient. And we sit back and go, wow, there's some great contagious power of good news.
Well, we hope that your effort is contagious. We'd like to see this in other major markets like Miami, New York, Chicago, San Francisco. Let me remind you that Ted Turner, when he started CNN back in 1977, wanted to do good news. He says, we're going to have an hour of good news every day. It lasted a week. So thank you very much for doing what you're doing and doing the follow-up that needs to be done.
And you know what? We're having so much fun.
We are. We really,
you should come to our fall.
Well, listen, if you let more men in, I may be there.
Hey, we need a few good men.
Thank you. Wendy Birch, Christine Devine, very, very much. You're watching LA Business Today. Sharon, there you go. Two TV women who leave the studio and do more than just go home.
Yes, Wendy and Christine are certainly making a difference. Stephen Sample, the president of USC, in an address to the LA World Affairs Council, said LA is the de facto capital of the Pacific Rim, with a broad business base that interacts strongly with all the economies around the rim, and that our strength is our cultural diversity and intellectual capital.
Los Angeles County has a population of 10.4 million people. That's larger than most nations, with no other nation having the wealth of cultural diversity that we have right here in the City of Angels.
If any region can lead the fight for a better economy and better business through healthier food choices and greater philanthropy, it is indeed Los Angeles. The women in our show today are part of the cultural diversity and intellectual capital that keeps us on the move.
For sure. Thank you for being with us and LA Business Today.
Thanks.
Bulky item pickup? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall. Graffiti removal? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall.
LA City View, Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Sure. Okay. You know, up to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilwoman Jan Perry, joined by Council Members Parks and Wesson, and this is the Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recovery and Investment. Mr. Clerk, let's take item number 1, and who's here to report on that?
Good morning, John White, City Clerk. Item 1, Mayor's Office, CLA, CAO, and various departments to present verbal reports relative to the status of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 and the following grant applications. A, Fire Department application for staffing for adequate fire and emergency response program 2009 R grant funding in the amount of $7,561,296, and the Police Department application for an anti-human trafficking task force recovery Act program grant award in the amount of $375,000 for the expansion of multidisciplinary task forces to improve the law enforcement response to human trafficking and the coordination of care for victims.
All right. I have a couple of questions. First one is, what's the city doing to utilize administrative fees available under ERA to compensate for administrative fees being incurred by the city?
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations with the Mayor's Office, and I'm joined by Bill Kreitz from the CAO's office. If you'd like, would you like me to answer those questions
please.
now or in the course of course of the presentation.
I don't, what works better for you?
Actually, maybe in the course of the presentation, if you wouldn't mind.
All right, well then, let me tell you the other question that I want to ask, and then you can determine when the best time is to answer. In the course of your presentation, I hope you'll answer in what ways can the CAO and the mayor's office work with departments to increase job creation in our ERA grants. So, and then I'll repeat those two if you need.
Good.
So let's proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to start out with some good news always, and so start out with the good news that yesterday President Obama announced the awards of $8 billion of high-speed rail money through ARA. These were competitive grants that were given out to 31 states. There was a total of $57 billion worth of requests that they received. California was the big winner in this, with receiving $2.3 billion out of the $8 billion. The number 2 state, I think, was a whole $1 billion less than California. Out of that $2.3 billion, about $400 million of that will be used by Caltrans for expanding and upgrading the existing rail lines that we have. So it'll have a direct benefit in Los Angeles for both our Amtrak service that we have in Los Angeles as well as the Metrolink service that we have. The remaining amount of money will be basically divided up and under the control of the California High-Speed Rail Authority. And I wanted to call attention to a chart that I gave you here for you to look at. There are actually 5 different lines that will be available for receiving funding under this. The one that we're most familiar with is the line that goes from Anaheim to Los Angeles. There are 2 other lines in the Central Valley. Then there's a line that basically of the peninsula from San Francisco to San Jose, and finally a line from Sacramento to the Bay Area. The question will become as to who will get what share of that money. The composition of the High-Speed Rail Authority is such that we have, I think, a majority of members from Southern California, so we're looking forward to that money being able to be available for the Los Angeles to Anaheim line. However, folks in the Central Valley actually have their environmentals cleared and will make a case for the fact that they're more ready to go on the funding for this than LA, which is still looking at where to site the terminus here in Los Angeles. But anyway, it's good news, again, that we're seeing this money that will be coming in. Basically needs to be spent by 2012 with funding decisions being made. So whoever is the new governor that's elected will probably have a lot to say, too, about where this money gets spent. Second thing I wanted to call to your attention is I think it was reported last week by the CAO's office that we did comply with the OMB in filing all of our quarterly reports under recovery.gov for how we're spending the money and the number of jobs that we're creating, etc. It was felt, though, however, that even though doing this on a quarterly basis, there was a need to to have more up-to-date information more often, and also some additional information that's not asked for by the OMB. So as a result of that, the CAO's office has prepared what they're calling basically a project health report on each one of the ARA projects. And when Bill does his report, I think they'll share a little bit more information about it. But this is a way for you to be able to, and these reports will be prepared on a monthly basis, to be able to see more about how the money is being spent, how many jobs are being created, what the impact of this is upon our own budget, and be able to get more timely information than once a quarter. The last thing I wanted to, and this goes to the questions that you raised, is I wanted to raise a problem that I've seen for some time that I think really needs your attention. On numerous occasions I've mentioned to this group and in speaking to outside groups that one of the main problems about the ARA funds as it impacts upon cities is that these funds cannot be used for budget stabilization like they can be used at the state and also at the school district level. What happens is that these funds come in, they're siloed into very specific programs that are used for either expanding existing programs or creating new programs. So at the same time, we've got coming in over here $500 million worth of ARA funds over the next couple of years as it stands right now. At the same time, we're grappling with the fact that we have significant budget deficits that were looming of several $100 million. So people ask the question, well, why do you have budget deficits over here if you're getting all this money from the federal government? And the reality of it is because that money that we're receiving from the federal government is very specific about how it can be spent, and it can't be used to supplement our budget deficits for the most part, which is a real problem. And we have an example here today before you that you're going to be looking at. The Department of Cultural Affairs is coming to you to ask for approval for a National Endowment of the Arts grant that they were awarded under ARA. It's a very small grant. It's $250,000 grant in comparison to the other things that we're getting, and most of the money is a pass-through to be able to go and assist local arts organizations in terms of what they're doing. But there is a request for retaining about $35,000 of that money to be able to hire a grants manager to oversee the distribution of these funds, because once we give this money out, those agencies become subrecipients. They will have to report every quarter. We will have to compile that information and send it off to the Office of Management and Budget. So they're coming to you today asking for acceptance of a grant and a position at a time when you're looking at the possibility of actually having to cut significantly this staff. And that's a problem that we're facing in a lot of other areas. Next week, the Federal Highways Administration Office of Inspector General will be out to look at 5 of our shovel-ready transit projects that they have some concerns about. We'll be meeting with them, and some of these projects go back several years. We'll be able to assemble the staff to be able to answer their questions and to walk them through the concerns they have. But when they come back 6 months from now, and they will come back 6 months from now, we will not have that staff there to answer those questions, because those people are all part of the early retirements program that we have in the city, and they won't be available to answer those kinds of questions. I don't really know what the answer to all of this is, but part of the problem is that we're going to be getting all this money coming in and reporting on it, and we're not necessarily going to have the people in place to either manage these programs or to be able to answer the questions of the inspectors that have the history in place. I can, though, tell you, and we have one other even more serious problem than that, and that's the problem with the overall administration and oversight which is being done by the CAO's office. Bill here is on early retirement. He's actually back here on a consultant contract. That contract will end in April if it's not extended. The folks that we have here with Blue Crane that help us, the consultants, their contract ends next week. Now, we have provisions within ARA that for the funding that we receive directly for us, where we're the direct recipient, we can take 1/2% of that money and apply it for administrative overhead to cover our administrative costs. That amounts to, right now, if we took the grants that we've won right now, that's about $1.2 million. There is a proposal that's been floating around that has not yet been submitted to you that basically would deign that money should be used to, in fact, strengthen and bolster the CAO's office so that we can do the proper administrative accounting and oversight that we need to do on all of these grants. And from my standpoint, I see this as basically insurance. I would much rather have us use that $1.2 million as insurance policy, because the inspectors that are coming out from FHWA are considering the possibility of de-obligating funding from some of our projects. We've already been put on notice that just the $7.5 million that we're receiving for broadband that we just got awarded last week might be taken away from us at the end of March if we're not able to resolve some outstanding audit issues. So to me, $1.2 million worth of administrative costs to bolster up the CAO's office is sort of an insurance policy against us losing much larger sums down the line. But this is a much larger issue that I think the council and the mayor's office and whatever needs to grapple with. If we're going to continue to go after these large sums of money, we have to have in place the ability to manage these funds as well as do the oversight necessary both in the CAO's office and the controller's office to be able to make sure that we don't lose these funds. So I hope that may answer in part the questions that you had.
Mr. Parks.
You know, I think you hit right on the head of what we've been talking about, grants, over the last several budget processes. And I think what you've identified is a couple of things. One, we've asked the CAO for now a number of years to be the centralized point for managing grants, because we have just too much activity that's going on in departments that you can't control or that you can't keep your fingers on. In fact, a year or so ago in one of our budget processes, we found one department had several $1 million in reimbursements in an account that no one knew existed. And so these are things that we need to do. The other thing that I think is equally important, we've said for years that often we get excited about the grant and what it could do, but we don't know the long-term impact. And we kind of shuffle the city's commitment to the side because we're excited about the grant. And we see many grants in the city that are upside down, that we get $200,000 and we spend $800 to get the $200. And so that's why I think we need the full accounting of what the grant means. It's X number of dollars in the door, but it's a 5-year commitment of X number of people. Where is that money coming from? Because at some point, you may decide not to accept the grant because you can't afford it from the city standpoint. And that's why we've asked early on, although we're applying for these grants, at some point we have to make a decision, do we accept them? Because the overall commitment may be such that you can't afford it. And so that's why I think we look at this and we apply this. In my mind, it's a two-step process. We apply for them, but when it comes back that we've been awarded, that's when we need to know the full accounting of years, general fund commitment, why we continue to harp on reimbursements in the year that the grant is being funded, because in some of these grants it creates a significant cash flow problem for us just in the fact that we do not get reimbursed in the year of the fiscal year that we're giving out the front-loaded money. So that's why that whole grant process has to be tightened up, because on the one hand we can sit here on Friday mornings and we high-five that we got $500 million worth of grants. In the condition of our city general fund, that's the only place we can look for to support this grant administration. And then when we look and we find just in the first 6 months of the year, we're almost $200 million short just on revenue projections. Then you start saying, well, then where does that money come from? And then we look and we find that our departments have overspent several $1 million. And so we can't use special funds for these special funds. So general fund is the only place to go to. And I think it's critical that as you put these together, we can't stop looking at the issue of what is the total cost. And that's where we've fallen short on grants in the past. Again, it's the enthusiasm of getting a grant, but we do not track the total impact on the general fund or the life of the project on the general fund, and we just absorb it. In fact, we talked to the CAO the other day and said, even when we have grants that have been around for a long while, we'll state it has no impact on the general fund. And then in the next paragraph, we'll say there's 6 positions in the department budget. Well, there's obviously an impact on the general fund because we're funding 6 positions that are not part of the grant. And so we're going to have to correct how we report, because we're basically, the city is absorbing significant amount of money that it may not be able to afford when we're thinking about just basic core responsibility of paying our payroll and our other issues that the grants are nice to have, but we may not be able to afford the volume that we're moving towards. And I think as you guys are dealing with it, we have to keep looking at them on a two-part. We apply, but when it gets down to acceptance, like you said, we had the big news conference about broadband. The worst thing in the world would be a week from now to say 7.7 million we're going to turn back because we accepted it and we do not have the resources to implement 2,700 whatever computers. That's why I think when at the point of acceptance, it has to be far more staffed out dollar-wise so we know exactly what it means.
Response? Did you want a response? Can you respond to that?
I would agree with what you said. I would hope that we could even get to the point even before we apply, so we're not in a situation. I mean, my charge, and I think CEO's charge is we want to go after every dollar that we can basically go after. But again, if we're not able to incorporate that somehow, or
it would be ideal to have it at the time of application, but I sensed that sometimes the deadline for application is so quick that you can't possibly staff it out to the level you need. But in the interim between the application, expecting acceptance, that's where the real work is done, because when they come back with the acceptance letter, we need to know this is going to cost you X number of dollars, and you may say, thank you, I can't accept this. Well, I mean, so rather than have the news conference accepted and find out we can't do it, it's that period of time during their evaluation is where our machinery needs to kick in to determine exactly what it's going to cost, people-wise, equipment-wise, reimbursement, whether it's going to be during that year, is it front money we need. All those things need to be figured out before we even get the letter of acceptance.
The other point that I would make, too, I would just strongly urge that this committee and the council really give serious consideration to using that 0.5% of the that's available to us to basically shore up our oversight. And because the one thing I don't want to have happen to us is if we do this and then we find out that we're not meeting the Auditor General's and Controller's expectations.
The only thing I would say about the 1 point something, I think if that is going to be a lump of money that administers the larger program, then I think we should give it serious consideration. If it's just a partial payment, and we find out that as more grants come in, there's going to be a need of more and more and more money, an unknown amount, I think we have to seriously think about that also, because what we've done with grants is we've partially funded the administrative overhead, and that keeps growing. And that growth is where we don't track very well. And so I think we have to figure out what does that 1 point something pay for. If we're saying it's going to be the total administration for all grants, because we know as these grants come through, everybody kind of picks a piece and a number and a body, and it kind of dissipates. And next thing you know, the CAO ends up with $3, and the rest of it is spread throughout departments. And so we really need to know what it covers. And if it doesn't cover the larger issue of our grant funding over this period of time, then we have to reflect on what does it pay for and where does the money come from. Do we keep getting the 1%? Or is this a finite 1%?
It's a 0.5% on any funding. This is ARA funds only now. Under any ARA funds that we're the direct recipient of. So if we're a sub-recipient for the state takes that 0.5%. But it's still based on the $500 million or more that we've gotten awarded. It would be about $1.2 million. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think we'd have to make a decision, again, and our discipline has not been good in this area, that if we're talking about the direct grants and it's a 0.5%, that it flows to that body in the CAO's office to manage and not be picked off body by body, as to the departments are going to get the grant, other grant units that just seem to siphon off those funds, and then the CAO is given the administration and really not the overall funding for it.
And Mr. Parks, Bill Kreitz with the CAO's office, if I could sort of take off on what you're saying, we are bringing a full report to this committee, most likely in a week or two, where we'll discuss this. But just briefly, the 0.5% on the prime, on the grants, and we're the prime, can only go to general administration, similar to what the CAO is doing and some aspects of the controller's doing. Some grants, some ARA grants, do have an administrative component to them, like 5 or 10%, which is specific to that grant. Other grants have nothing with respect to administrative costs. So what we are talking about here is general administration to finance what we are doing in the CAO's office now. And if I could, we will talk about this more in the report that you're going to get. But the CAO has absorbed out of our general fund, our salaries account, since July, a significant amount of money because we were not funded for doing this. So part of this, it's actually about $1 million or so per year over the next 3 years based on the win ratio or the award percentage that we have. And we're anticipating that to be a straight line. into the future. But that money will partially reimburse us for costs back to July. Of course, this team started in March, but we're going back to July, so it would partially reimburse us for that and then go forward. And we have a plan also, as Jim sort of referred to, which I could talk about at greater length. I realize we're a little bit time constrained this morning, but we have a plan for addressing some of these issues about oversight, about assisting the departments, and very frankly, the departments, we're looking at 22 departments and bureaus who are administering ARA monies. Those departments, for the most part, are not staffed to do what we've asked them to do. We have overlaid ARA oversight or project management as a, if you will, as a template on top of the duties that they already have, and not to mention ERIP and retirement and furloughs and all those kinds of things. But the departments, while stretched, have done a marvelous job, I might add, because we deal with them all the time. They have done a tremendous job. They don't complain, but they are, I believe, they are to the max in some cases trying to manage the ARA grants, because there are so many other requirements as part of ARA, transparency, turnaround time, et cetera, et cetera. So the departments, I want to tell you, have done a tremendous job, but it is very difficult to add ARA on top of their other responsibilities.
I agree, and I think my final comment on that is that we'd hope that as you go forward and put this template together, that you're fully aware of what the other part of the CAO's office is recommending as to mergers, departments being downsized, departments being outsourced, all of those things, because we have a tendency to give tasks to people who don't exist. And so all of a sudden, we're basically in the same office making recommendations on issues that are contrary to what the final reality is going to be.
Absolutely.
I believe Mr. Alarcon would like to ask a question. Mr. Alarcon, Ms. Hahn, and Mr. Rosendahl are here.
Yeah, looking at the report, I'm seeing $586 million has been granted, has been awarded. We requested almost $1.5 billion and have been awarded almost 600 to date. Our full-time job creation is 338. The total jobs created is 1,200, but that's because we created 869 full-time jobs, or part-time jobs, excuse me, and only 67 jobs have been created in the private sector. So I'm calculating that it costs us about $1 million to create one job. I just can't understand that. Now, by comparison, I'm looking at the city of New York, which has gained $5.8 billion. Now, recognizing they're 2.5 times, or actually 2 times bigger than us, and also they're a county. But their full-time job creation equivalence is 27,000. And if you do the math, it's about $50,000 per job. And I'm just doing that off the top of my head. It may be very different. Now, so everybody said, well, wait a minute, New York is a county and they get $1 billion for one healthcare grant. Of course, they've applied for something like $27 billion, or was it 17 billion, or how much did they apply for? Well over $10 billion, and they've got $5.8 billion. So I said, well, wait a minute, let's look at San Francisco, a much smaller city than Los Angeles. Let's see how they're doing. They've received, and again, they're a city county, so they get some county money that we don't have access to. But they've received $320 million, and their population is $764,000, and they've created 420 full-time job equivalents, 422, and we've only created 338. Now, so if you look at their per job created per dollar, it's about $100,000. And I'm being conservative when I say $1 million a job in Los Angeles. But you give me $1 million, and I'll create a hell of a lot more jobs than one. So we've got a serious problem here. A serious problem. And the first thing we ought to be doing is finding out what is New York City doing that we aren't doing, what is San Francisco doing that we aren't doing, what is it we need to do. And so the first thing we need to do is a comparison study of what is going on with the other cities and how are they getting, first of all, more money, and secondly, more jobs for their dollar investment. And then the second thing we need to do is then gear ourselves towards something that looks more akin to their models, because they're obviously having much greater success. I'm not opposed to using the 0.5% or wherever it is toward getting dollars. But the primary purpose of these grants is creating jobs. And when we're creating one job for, approximately, I'm just rounding it off to $1 million. It's a minimum of $1 million. It's closer to $2 million per job for full-time job equivalents. And yeah, we created 869 temporary jobs. That's not real stimulus. That's a temporary thing. But the full-time job equivalent, and only 67 in the private sector? What are we doing? I don't get it. I had a nice meeting with you all, and I was feeling better after the meeting, but when I saw these numbers and compared them to some of the other jurisdictions, it just blew me away.
Well, the first thing I would say is that the $586 million that we have is not money that we have. This is money that we will get over a course of 3 years. So that amount of money will be a fixed amount, let's say, for that.
So how does that compare to New York?
But the number,
they're getting their money and we're not? Is that what you're saying?
No. Everybody is on a reimbursement basis.
So how come they're creating jobs and we're not?
Well, it depends on the types of things that they're being funded for.
Well, obviously.
They have a school district, they have hospitals and healthcare systems that the kinds of grants that they're receiving may, in fact, employ more people because they're geared toward that, as opposed to...
that's an easy argument.
I know.
That's the argument you gave me in the meeting.
Well,
but what I'm telling you is 27,000 jobs that's a multiple of about 100 more than 100 times more than us, and their funding isn't 100 times more than us.
And I would question that. And in the meeting that we had, that we reported to you how skewed all of this job reporting information has been as to what people are counting as jobs and what they have to count it for and whatever.
Well, let's skew ours like they are.
Well, that's part of the problem. I mean,
let's get on the same page.
What we're doing right now with these health reports is to be able to track each month how we're doing about what we projected that we thought we would have in terms of the number of jobs, and seeing if we're on track with what we projected that we will have as a result of this grant. Now, maybe what they're doing is reporting what they estimate that they're going to have at the end of that grant. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to find out. They may be saying, yes, at the end of this grant we'll have employed 3,000 people, but we don't have 3,000 people now, but we're going to report 3,000 people.
I know. I know. In fact, I told my staff the same thing. We can't compare apples to oranges. I recognize that. But this is a glaring...
Okay.
Remember, the primary purpose of these grants is to create jobs. When you look at the jobs created to the dollars spent, we're not even in the ballpark. And I don't care whether it's healthcare dollars or construction dollars. It doesn't matter, because the focus is supposed to be on job creation. So we have created, not even close to the proximity of these other jurisdictions.
And I think I'll just make one other example, as I explained to you. Unfortunately, the way that they do it, we got $42 million in WIA money, Workforce Investment Act money, to train people. We put thousands of people through the training program. And those people, we train them for jobs that are existing jobs, living wage jobs, which is credible. We're not training people to be fry cooks at McDonald's, so that we believe that there'll be a legitimate job out there for them and a living wage job. We don't get to count any of those people who went through the training that get jobs as a job creation. We only get to count the people that actually we hired that do the training.
Now, they don't have the same issue in New York.
It depends on how much we got more WIA money than maybe that they did.
Well, maybe,
Well,
Come on,
I don't,
come on.
I know, I don't have the chart in front of me.
No, this is shucking and jiving. We need a full-blown comparison of why these jurisdictions are getting more club for their buck. I mean, that's the bottom line. We cannot have, at the end of the day, created 338 full-time jobs when we spent $500 million. And these other jurisdictions are multiplying that by 100.
So but we haven't spent the, again, this is on a reimbursement basis.
But they're on the same clock we are. And this program's going to run out. So they're on the same clock, and we can't, how long are we going to keep saying that we're different than them when we're not creating the jobs? At some point, it kicks in.
Okay, can somebody answer Mr. Alarcon's question?
Mr. Alarcon, if I will, Bill Crates in the CAO's office. I might bring two items. I don't know that this satisfies your question, but if I could bring two items to bear on this. Number one, the way we have defined awarded, we're loosely defining the term awarded, therefore the $586 million. If we've been notified, that is the city, has been notified either informally by email or we see an award posted on a federal website that we're getting the grant, we're showing that as awarded. The actual number of contracts that we have...
But those issues apply to all the other jurisdictions also.
Well, they do. I don't know exactly. We are actually in contact with New York City quite often, but I don't know if that's exactly how they're defining or how they're showing awards.
What would be the alternative? That they're showing less? I mean, if they're not doing it the way you're doing it, then they would have better numbers.
That's true, actually.
So bad response.
That is a bad response, yes. It's a fact nonetheless, but I don't know how to compare the two of those without actually looking at it. However, the second part of my response would be this. Part of our proposal is we are moving from, right now, we are evolving from an applications management emphasis to a project management because so much effort was placed on getting the applications in for the deadline. We are now in the CAO's office and working with the mayor's office and the controller as well. We're moving to actively manage projects. One of the options we have, one of the proposals we have, is to put a tiger team together where we are actually going out to the departments and we're going to start advising them on ways to expedite moving the projects forward, job creation. We're looking at creating baselines so we can look at plan versus actual. So we're in the process of doing that right now so that we can get better data and at the same time urge them to please expedite as much as they're able to.
Okay, all of that doesn't answer my question. Why are the other jurisdictions having greater success?
Well, I will do this. We will talk to New York, and I want to see that they actually have 27,000 jobs that they've actually created.
If they had half, they would be kicking our butt.
Yeah, because I'm not sure. They all got the same amount of money at the same time we did, and they have to go through the same processes before they can start awarding money and paying people and putting them on payroll. So I'd like to.
Okay.
I want to verify that.
Job creation, job creation, job creation, job creation. Our people need jobs.
Thank you. Let's see, there being no other speakers in the queue on this, that is first part of item 1, and then I believe we go on to item 1A.
In the absence of time, we'll go ahead and let the departments come forward and present on the grants.
Yes, because we must end promptly at 10, and we're still on item 1. Here.
Okay, I think it's award definitions and then it's
Morning, council members. The fire department, before you have a grant for SAFER, which is a 2009 SAFER grant. What we're looking for is approximately $7.56 million to hire 38 firefighters. This grant is a no-match grant. It pays for 100% of the salary plus benefits, and it also includes FLOSSA in that, which is good. What we're going to be using this for is we're going to be replacing firefighters that we've lost to attrition that we have not been able to replace due to the economic downturn. This is the first time the LA City Fire Department has the opportunity to apply for this specific grant. It normally goes towards departments that have a staffing levels that don't meet 1720, which is less than 4 people on an engine company. So they actually open it up due to the economic downturn to other agencies. Approximately $210 million is in the overall SAFER budget. They expect about 4,000 to 5,000 applicants, asking for about $4 to $6 billion. It is a peer review grant, and this is what we're requesting, and this is what you have in front of you.
Quick question. This, obviously, we have cash flow issues. Since this grant is paid for on a reimbursement basis, can you just, for the record, give us the details on the process that will be used?
Sure. I will defer that to Bill Jones, our fiscal person.
I apologize, Council Member. I do have a hard time hearing. Can you restate your question?
What I wanted to know is this grant will be paid on a reimbursement basis. So would you provide us with some details on how that process will work?
Yes. Bill Jones with the Fire Department. The reimbursement, what we will do is we'll monitor these individuals by identify them by name. We will pull their payroll records on a monthly basis and submit on a monthly basis for reimbursement based upon the salaries that we have paid. We do that so that we can recover as much in the current fiscal year as possible.
Ms. Hahn.
So this is to hire 38 new firefighters.
Correct, that we've lost through attrition that are now currently vacant positions in the field that we have not been able to hire because we've canceled 2 of our last drill tower classes.
Yeah. Okay. Will this have any effect on the current budget crisis in terms of our brownouts?
It might. We'd have to reevaluate it at that time depending on the numbers that were approved and where we actually placed those and how quickly we got them into the field.
Right. Is it problematic in any way applying for this grant that there's not a current contract or anything with the fire department at this time?
Not that I know of. We've spoken with our labor union, UFLAC, on this, and they're 100% behind this at this time.
Okay. Okay, good.
Mr. Rosendahl.
I'm absolutely delighted, obviously, to see this grant come for our fire department. As we know, in this incredible budget crisis, police, fire, sanitation are the baselines of keeping our government going. In my district, especially in the Palisades, we had some real issues about the rolling, whatever we called them, about when we had a red flag day. And we got the understanding from the chief that if there's a red flag day, we suspend it up in the Palisades because it's a tough situation if we were, God forbid, have a fire. The 38 positions, frontline positions, do you see this developing into more over the next period of time? And how will it affect, as Ms. Hahn was saying, the right question was, will it impact us in basic fire services?
It should allow us to reestablish some of the engine companies that might be under the modified coverage plan, but again, the fire chief would need to reevaluate that at that time.
Mm-hmm. And do you see this as a beginning of more funding for the fire department? In other words, this is 38, and we like that. Do we have hope and sort of a strategy to up that number?
You know, I don't really have a direct answer for that because this is a one-time grant in the beginning. Sure. If it was available to us, we could apply again. But as of right now, it's that one-time funding.
But you look excited. What were we going to add to that?
Just that it is over a 2-year period and that there may be, and I emphasize may, be an opportunity next year to apply for additional positions.
Because I think the fact that we got it suggests that they appreciate where we're coming from. So that's why I think we should just work on that energy.
Well, just so you know, we haven't received it yet. We're applying for it. We hope to get it.
Oh, well, I'm even more expecting than possible. Okay, well, thank you for that.
One more quick question. How do we justify, or how does the department justify, if we accept this grant, there are costs associated with it, uniforms, training, probably to the tune of over $2 million in the upcoming year. So how do you justify that? And I think the department's already overextended year to date.
The justification for that would be, these are the recruit classes that we canceled are classes that we would need to fill attrition anyways. So these are classes we would have to have anyways at some point. So based on that, those items are already in our budget for the recruit training class, I believe, for 010.
Yes, we've applied for 3 recruit training classes in the 010-11 budget year. We do not expect that these funds would be made available to the department in the current fiscal year.
Okay, so what are you saying, that by that time the funds are available, you will have reconciled the overextension within your own department so that you would be balanced out by the time you're ready to accept this grant? You won't be overextended? Is that what you're saying?
I believe what we would do is look at the grant, look at our funding in the next fiscal year when it's made available. Certainly, if funding were not made available in that year for recruit training classes, we would have to reevaluate at that time.
Okay. Any other, Mr. Parks?
Is this training above and beyond the regular training academy? Because that staff is already funded, right?
That's correct. No, this is just the regular training academy.
So the training academy staff, so in essence, we're looking at, they have uniforms and whatever equipment we provide them, because the training staff, if I understand it, hasn't been moved or altered. They're in position to do the training.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if the 2.4 is a false figure in the fact that, being that the staff's there, we may need equipment and whatever emergency equipment we give them, and if that's part of the 3 classes for next fiscal year, if those are funded, that 2.4 is already taken care of. Because it appears, by the way it's written, that you're going to need 2.4 above everything else, which causes folks to look at it and say, where's it coming from?
Okay.
But if it's part of your ongoing training class that's funded, it would appear it's a wash.
We did include it. It is inclusive in the 3 classes that we submitted for. We simply wanted to portray the full cost so that you are aware of what portion of that, the 3 classes would be attributed to the 38 individuals.
Okay, in the 3 classes that you're talking about, that's how many total recruits, or is the total the 38?
The 3 classes would be 50 recruits per class. Okay. We have the breakdown for the...
So this is 38 of the 150?
That would be correct.
Okay. Now, what do we have to do? Create a baseline as to so that you can get the funding for attrition? To show, so because we have to create a baseline of saying, here's the department's strength, and then we attrit below and we bring them back, the 38?
No, what it was that it was based upon our total allocation as of October 31, 2009, and what positions we had lost or were below that at that date.
Clearly we're not adding.
We are not adding to the department's allocation.
But you created a baseline, whatever that date was you just mentioned.
Correct.
Is what we're trying to get back to with the attrition. Okay.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, that will be 1A. Mr. Alarcon, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand. I'm doing the math here. When you add up the 2.4 and the money, it's about $10 million. We're creating 38 positions.
Yes.
The average cost being about $250,000 each. I was under the impression that that each firefighter didn't cost us that much.
They don't, Councilmember. The $260,000 that you referred to per firefighter would include also administrative costs and benefits. The SAFER grant does pay for the benefits of those 38 firefighters over the 2-year period. So it would be a per-year cost of, with benefits, roughly about $99,486. Over the 2-year period, it'd be $198,978 without the administrative costs, and so the administrative cost would be a one-time $62,000, and that includes the cost of the cadre, the recruit training cadre, the uniforms.
How much did you say was the annual administrative costs that would be temporarily supported by this grant for 2 years?
Not annual. It would be a one-time $62,000, and that would include
per
per firefighter.
Firefighter?
Yes.
And that's for a 2-year period?
Yes.
Okay. And so 62,000 times 38 is how much?
I don't have that figure in front of me.
I can hear...
ballpark would be about 200,000.
Councilmember Parks' wheels clicking here. But so in 3 years, the city would have to absorb that cost?
Over the 2-year period, yes.
No.
And most likely in the first fiscal year.
After the 2-year period.
The training costs would not be reoccurring. We don't send the individuals through
the administrative cost.
Yes, sir.
After the 2-year period, the city would have to absorb that cost. You said that the federal government provided, the ERA grant will provide a temporary 2-year administrative cost recovery. But after that, then we have to pick it up, right?
Councilmember,
I'm asking, what is the ongoing cost after the 2 years?
The ongoing cost would be your salaries and benefits. They only go through the academy once.
No, I recognize that.
So
the administrative cost that Bill Jones is referring to is actually the cost of the academy and the cost of the staff and everybody that's associated with that. So that would only be when we're actually running them through the academy. So I think that might be what we're referring to. So if we don't run an academy, then there would be no additional administrative costs the city would be incurring. And this is actually benefiting us because it's helping us pay for the firefighter's salary while they're at the academy, which we would normally not be able to do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon. Anybody else? All right. That will conclude item 1A, and we move on to 1B.
Good morning, council members. Kevin McClure, I'm Commanding Officer, Robbery Homicide Division, and with me is Kimberly Agbonkpalor, who is our Human Trafficking Grant Coordinator, and Lieutenant Carlos Velez, the OIC of Robbery Homicide Division, Robbery Section. Before us is a $375,000 grant to extend the Human Trafficking Task Force in LAPD for the next 3 years. That is to supplement the $125,000 that we get from the federal government. This grant is to pay approximately 70% of the salary of our grant coordinator, Kimberly here, along with reimburse CAST and pay for outreach programs, training, and to assist with investigations in human trafficking.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. Obviously this is good news. This is still, I think, one of the worst sort of crimes against human beings that is going on, frankly, right under our nose. I know we've had a couple of, quote, safe houses found in some of the communities that I represent. Watts, there was one like for 2 years that there'd been like over 100 people kind of in and out of the house. And it became very clear that part of what, in my opinion, was not happening was a really good, intensive educational outreach program to neighborhoods, to community groups, to churches, to like, hey, if you see, people coming, night and day on because these homes are like right in residential neighborhoods. And I haven't really felt the sort of the penetration of that type of outreach happening like I think it should, with PSAs and billboards. And is that part of this? And what's your take on that piece of how we help to curtail this horrible activity?
Well, I'll talk about a couple things, and then I'll let Kimberly talk about some of the outreach efforts that we have been doing. But actually, you're absolutely right. That is one of the things that we have discussed at length as of late in the LA Metropolitan Task Force itself. And within the last couple of weeks, we had Alice Hill out here from the Department of Homeland Security, and we actually conducted a roundtable at the new police building to discuss what we thought were some of the issues that were going on. And that is one of the issues that was at the forefront, that the way it's looked at now, a lot of it is investigation by luck. And a lot of the investigations that we have actually been successful in is just because some citizen happened to see something that just didn't quite look right. And what we really want to focus on in the upcoming years with this is the education of the public. We think we've done a very good job in the organizations as to how to deal with them, and we're getting much better at that. But unless we get the message out to the public, we will probably continue to do it the same way. There's a lot of issues that come up with numbers, a lot of bad numbers in there, and the whole communication of as soon as we start to figure out how they work, they change their strategy. And the communication between us and our federal partners was something that was discussed. We anticipate that will get much better, and the education of the public is where we'll focus. And there has been some billboard campaigns. If
right, and I will tell you, and I don't know if this is even possible, but I think in 2010, what's the biggest thing happening right now where people are actually going to be going door to door counting? The census. I mean, we have an opportunity here, and again, I don't know how that works. I know that's their only job, and they're not, they're very specific about questions they can ask. There's only 10 things. It's confidential. That's the big part of the census, is confidential. But I'm just wondering if there's any correlation there to partner with that organization just to help us, because I'm telling you, this is one of the worst crimes against human beings, and mostly against women. Mostly against women.
Yes. It is certainly something we can look into.
Yeah, and they are being held captive. They are slaves. And I just, I never want to see that happen again. The one that we discovered in my community of Watts, it was horrific. So go ahead.
I think everybody here at this table agrees. Go ahead.
Yes, actually we are doing a lot of awareness campaigns. We've done mobile billboard panels. We've done public service announcements via digital TV on MTA bus lines. I'm actually doing a lot of training with neighborhood watches right now. I've partnered with the program coordinators in the neighborhood empowerment to reach out to the neighborhood councils. And actually doing training with our community policing advisory board. So we are reaching out into the community, providing training, and also having individuals call into our local 800 line.
Mr. Alarcon, did you want to make a comment?
Ask the same question. How many full-time job equivalents will be created out of this $375,000?
Actually, a requirement of the grant is that we sub-award to our nonprofit, and through that sub-award, there will be one full-time job creation. Also, the grant will be reimbursing the salary of the program manager and providing reimbursement for overtime expenditures to conduct investigations.
We're only creating one job?
One full-time job, and then it's also reimbursing the salary of the program manager.
Okay, so, but we're only creating one job.
Yes, but this grant, okay, thank you.
Okay. Need to get through one job.
Mr. Parks.
Let me just ask, Captain, could you tell us how many sworn officers are they assigned directly to this, or is this just a supplemental duty that they provide the service to the program coordinator?
Supplemental duty solely. The only full-time employee would be...
So they do a lot of other things, and this is one of them?
Yes, the majority of the investigations are handled by either the Administrative Vice Division or Lieutenant Velez's robbery section.
So it's just part of their regular workload?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Arnold Sachs has filled out a speaker card on item 1B. Mr. Sachs, if you would please come forward right now so you can speak on this item.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Arnold Sachs. I appreciate Councilman Alarcon's concern regarding the cost of about $200,000 for the people that are going to be hired, each person, the personnel, each person is going to cost $200,000. What percentage of that $200,000, I believe the explanation was it wasn't just salaries, but it includes retirement and other benefits. So what is the percentage of the $200,000 that is going to the retirement and other benefits of that total? Because that's the real problem. You hear it all the time with the pensions and the budget crisis that the city is facing. If the costs are so high to make a total of $200,000, if you have 20 people you hire, and that's $100 million over the course of 25 years. That's going to be spent each for that 20 people. And if you have 10,000 police officers that you hire, or 5,000 or 6,000 firemen that you hire, do the math. Where is the money going to come from to afford to keep paying $200,000 per person per year for the benefits and the salaries that nobody wants to face up to? There's the numbers. Do something about changing the numbers, and maybe you'll do something about controlling the debt and the bankruptcy that the city is facing. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. There's no further comments on item 1B, so we will move on to item 2. We have a placeholder on item 2, and we must begin the council meeting in approximately 2 minutes. So if I can get staff up here to present on item 2.
With the CAO's office. The item before you requests authority to submit the attached list of recovery zone bond projects to the state. The state has a requirement that we submit a plan of issuance by January 31st. This proposed plan is not a recommendation for these projects. This is simply to meet the state requirement that we submit this plan and preserve our allocation. If we fail to submit the plan by today, then we essentially waive the recovery zone bond allocations.
All right, questions or comments? All right, we'll move forward with that recommendation. Again, there's a placeholder on 2 today. Mr. Clerk, are there any other items on the agenda for the
Yes, ma'am. Item 3.
All right, staff here on item 3.
To ask you to accept a $250,000.
Your name?
Oh, sorry, Olga Gadag, General Manager of the Department of Cultural Affairs. We're asking you to accept a $250,000 grant from the ARA program of the National Endowment for the Arts that the department has been awarded.
And Mr. Alhan, all right. Do you want to ask a question? This is 3.
Hi.
How many jobs?
They want to know how many jobs.
It's going to be about 12 jobs. The grants are between $15,000 and $45,000. We are turning those grants into sub-grants for arts job preservation here in the community. These are both full-time and part-time jobs. So, for example, if an organization gets $15,000 from us, arts jobs are typically not very high-paying, so they might come up with the other $15,000 to make it a full-time job, or they might have 3 part-time jobs at $5,000 each. So these sub-grants were awarded on a competitive basis using a peer review panel.
So is this, okay, I'm sorry, can I?
Yes.
So have we already received this?
Correct.
And you've already started awarding these grants?
Well, we haven't entered into contracts, but the decision-making has taken place, and the NEA has sent us the money. We have about $234,000 of the $250 in place. We're making awards of $215,000, so we actually have about $14,000 that we can use to reimburse ourselves for staff time that we've dedicated to it. So it's...
so how large are the grants that you're awarding?
The smallest grant is $15,000. The largest is $45,000.
And you have not awarded those yet?
No, we've made the peer review recommendations, and we're ready to go with contracts, but we needed to get your authority first.
I would like to see the awardees that you're looking to award. Is that in our packet?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't see that. You've got them in there, and they're all, it's already all spoken for.
Yeah, and there's small to mid-sized arts organizations throughout the city of Los Angeles.
Any in San Pedro?
I don't believe...
One of the largest arts communities in the city.
But they have to apply. So sometimes...
Did they know to apply? Did they know to apply? How did people know to apply? Here we go.
We put it on our website. We send out email blasts. We send out press releases. We had an orientation session to enable people to ask us
If I was to randomly survey my arts folks in San Pedro, will they say they knew about this?
They should know about this.
Will they say they knew about this?
I think some of them would.
Some of them would have.
I will say one thing, Councilwoman, is that San Pedro organization did get funding, but they got the money from the county versus from us. We joined forces with the county, and actually the County Arts Commission and the city's Department of Cultural Affairs were the only two local arts agencies in the entire state of California that got money from the federal government. So we split up. They funded some of the organizations and we funded some. So for example, Angels Gate in San Pedro got money, but they got the money from the county.
What about my Watts artists? Were they anywhere?
We funded the Pan-African Film Festival, which has a lot of programming in Watts. We funded the Friends of the Chinese American Museum, the Latino Theater Company, Unusual Suspects, which works with incarcerated kids. So it was really a broad-based group of people. Contratiempo, which is a dance company in Latino communities. The Greenway Arts Alliance, which works in schools. One of the targets that we had was working with organizations that had lost funding from LAUSD as their money for arts programming shrank. So we actually prioritized those organizations so that we could keep arts in the school system. So we really tried very hard to get this money. Aside from being only one of two organizations in the state of California to get the money, we were only one in 19 in the whole country. So we're very proud that we were able to bring this money to the arts community.
Thank you. Is Art to Grow On still happening in some of our schools?
I'm sorry?
Art to Grow On, is that still
Yes.
happening in some of our schools? I know, because I know they're in dire straits as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hahn. No further comments or questions? Oh, Mr. Rosendahl.
Hi.
What people need to perceive is that grant continues the multiplier effect of what art does to the community. People sometimes don't appreciate that the traction to Los Angeles, in part, is tourist art. Could you talk about that and see and give me some hope that we might get some more federal grants, because this is good for the economy and for jobs?
Absolutely. I'm proud to say that during my tenure of 2.5 years, we've brought in $9.7 million in federal funds and in private funds from foundations, which is pretty extraordinary given that the year before I got here, only $856,000 had been raised. So we've more than multiplied it by 10 times. In return, every time we give a grant, for every dollar we give out, $8 are multiplied. So this really does enter into the bloodstream of the economy in a very positive way.
I appreciate that, because some people don't realize the effect it has on the overall economy because of tourism and art and the appreciation of L.A., a megalopolis of the planet.
Absolutely. And I think that we're really getting some traction in terms of our designation as a world-class cultural community.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. So we will move all those items forward without objection. Put the mic closer.
It's off. You want to approve the CA report?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to approve. All right.
Councilwoman, can we make a technical correction on this?
Yes, because Solwoman for the Department of Cultural Affairs, because we've already received the money and we have cash sitting in one of our trust accounts, we need to transfer the money to a newly created ARA fund, so we'd like to add a recommendation that the controller be authorized to transfer $229,000 from revenue source 370G in Fund 337 to the newly created ARA fund.
Jenny.
All right, so that can be...
I would just say,
Mike.
We agree with the recommendations.
All right, fine, we don't that without objection. And that'll be the order of recommendation. All right, any other items on the agenda?
No, ma'am.
All right, so this committee meeting is adjourned.